All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World. I am delighted to be back again. We've got another two podcasts this week, and today's going to be an interesting one. It's been one that I've been looking forward to. I think probably since I would say about September time, something like that. I'm dying to get into this conversation with Surbhi Rathore, the CEO of Symbl.ai, because this technology is very unique. Most of the time, or lots of the time, you'll hear us talk on this podcast about different types of NLP-based technologies, but most of the industry seems to be gravitating towards kind of like conversational AI, conversations between bots and humans. But there's nothing wrong with that. But there is a whole bunch of data that exists within the conversations that you, your customers, your users are having every single day that you can utilize to great effect. And so I'm dying to get into this conversation with Surbhi today. Before we do that, a shout out to Deepgram, one of our presenting sponsors for this episode of VUX World. Deepgram is one of the industry leaders in terms of speech recognition. People and companies are using this technology to power voice bots and a whole bunch of other use cases around that as well. Anything that requires speech recognition, turning audio spoken words into text, Deepgram is definitely where we would recommend. They are incredibly good with pricing, incredibly high levels of accuracy. You can retrain those models as well to make it specific to your domain. And so if you are in the market for a speech recognition system, do check out Deepgram. You can go to deepgram.com/VUX World. That's deepgram.com/VUX World. Our other presenting sponsor, ironically enough, is joining us today. So I'm not going to talk too deeply about Symbl.ai because you can hear it from Surbhi herself in 2 minutes' time. But what I will say is that this episode of VUX World, we do have a partnership with Symbl.ai. This episode is not part of that partnership. We don't charge companies to feature on the podcast. The podcast is basically companies that I'm interested in exploring, use cases I'm interested in learning about, and things that I think you, the VUX World community, will be interested in as well. So it's just purely ironic that we have Surbhi joining us today from Symbl.ai. And without further ado, we will welcome Surbhi Rathore, CEO of Symbl.ai, onto VUX World. Surbhi, welcome.
Hello, so nice to be here. Finally, I know we've been trying to schedule this for times.
Yeah. Well, the last time was COVID, so I hope everything is all good in your household now.
Yes, I am fully recovered, and so is everybody else. So all good.
Good. Yeah, it seems to be mad COVID. My dad had it recently. I've managed to avoid it, weirdly enough. I don't know how I've managed to get away with
Good,
it.
good for
Yeah,
you. Don't say
yeah.
that.
Was it
No,
bad? Was it bad? Were you bad? Like, was it bad?
it was. I think 2 days were super bad, but otherwise that it was just like a bad flu. That's
Right.
pretty much it. Yeah.
Right, yeah, fair enough. Well, at least it wasn't so bad. I kind of want to get it. I think according to what I read, not that I read in too much detail about it, but getting vaccinated and then getting COVID appears to be like the winning combination. So,
There's
yeah.
also a bit of FOMO now. Did you have COVID? No, I did not. Well, I had COVID, so like people are
Yeah,
waiting to cross to the other line of the bridge now.
exactly. And in like in 10, 20 years' time, when people look back at this moment in time and the people who managed to kind of pull through it without any scars or whatever, it's kind of gone. I think you might be a bit of an outcast if you didn't have COVID. So
I
I think
know that's right.
yeah. Cool. Well, welcome to the show. I'm absolutely over the moon to have you on. Symbl AI is a company I've been incredibly interested in, as I mentioned in the brief intro there, for quite a number of months. I think I come across it first around about 6 months ago or so, maybe it's a little bit longer actually. And I've been following the journey. Congratulations on the funding round, and
Thank you.
yeah, keen to explore it. We've got some questions coming in already, which we'll get to in a moment. But I think first it might be just useful for the people tuning in if you were able to give us a bit of a background to yourself, and then how Symbl AI came to be, and then we'll get into exactly what Symbl AI is and what it does and how it works and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello everyone whoever are listening or will listen the recordings. But I'm Surbhi Rathore. I'm the CEO and co-founder of the company. We started Symbl almost 3.5 years back with the foundation of building a developer-first platform to analyze conversations at scale. And my background, I'm an engineer and worked in software for a really long period of time. Eventually, got exposed to the whole pre-sales and sales motion of technical products, specifically on the conversational AI side. So spent some time in the telecommunication space looking at voice bots and virtual assistants, and was really inspired by how human conversation data, our speech, our audio, our video, and multiple other channels like text and email will together really define the new experiences which are being built. So it's not about one single channel or one single data. It's really about all interactions that are happening place across the board. And that's how Symbol came into existence. So today, our primary use cases are converting voice and audio into context and structure and provide it easily through simple APIs to developers, whether real time or using a WebSocket or asynchronously for recorded files, URLs, as well as for telephony endpoints. It's a cloud based solution at this point of time, and we are really excited to power some of the use cases, specifically around like a lot of people trying to build their own gong and chorus. And if you have heard about that, we'll talk about real time call coaching in a bit, which seems to be one of the most important applications that is happening today to measure the quality of human interactions and improve them. So, yeah, that's a little bit about the company.
Interesting. So where did it come from then? Where did your kind of it sounds as obviously you've had just some experience working in the AI field, some experience
Yeah.
on the kind of technical side, experience with voice bots. Where did the need for something like Symbol come from?
I think it was a natural evolution for us in the area that we were working. We were so exposed to customer interactions at scale, both me and my co founder. We spent like almost a decade looking at all the software workflows and products and building them that improves customer interactions at scale, whether it is reducing average call handling time or creating better workflows and all of that. It was primarily in the contact center space that we really experienced. And then self-service was another big area of disruption from like how can you put virtual assistants in a self-service interaction, which will help reduce the load of new tickets getting raised or decrease the time to resolutions for end customers. We did all of that for developers in the telco space. That was the focus area. And so it was a lot of exposure to the type of interactions, the type of go to market that naturally led to the next in this entire space, which is there are great technologies which are being built today that you can apply for NLU for chatbots and for building virtual assistants. But when you try to use the same technology for human interactions, the voice calls, the sales calls, the meetings that happens all across the globe now, humongously high volumes, it you cannot get the same results because it is more unstructured, it's more chaotic, and it takes a different foundational building from an NLU standpoint to analyze this conversation data. So
Mm.
that was the start. Also, we saw a lot of companies spending massive amounts of dollars and investing into building their own data science teams to build this from ground up without having enough predictability of where will we land, what use cases will we build, and what experiences will we create. So it was a complete green space. There were products like Gong, Chorus, Observe that were starting and building great experiences from an end user standpoint. And the need of every single SaaS platform to have a communication endpoint to understand their customers only seemed to increase. So with Symbol, our goal is to enable these product builders utilize the conversation and communication data in their products and build experiences that will fuel the next stage of growth within their ecosystem.
Interesting. So, what would be an example? I mean, you mentioned a couple of examples of the type of voice data, essentially, types of conversations that are happening within organizations, voice calls, sales calls, meetings, and a whole bunch of other calls that would happen in and around organizations. What would some of the examples be of some of the kind of intelligence that Symbol AI can extract?
Yeah, so we provide, there are three layers to our product. One is the conversation processing layer, which is speech recognition, but with, we call it like transcription plus because it does more than just speech recognition. It will help you generate paragraphs, identify action phrases, analytics like what's per minute talk time, basic stuff, which just helps you process conversation data. That's our product line one. Second product line is around contextual insight. So if you don't know what to look in the conversation, you can use some of the APIs within this product to extract topics, topic hierarchies, automatically identify topics with the right sentiments, also identify contextual insights like action items and follow-ups and questions, which are pretty baseline to every conversation data. And that's where we have kind of like identified and extracted these structure from the conversation out of the box without having you to train anything or without having you to give an external vocabulary list. We don't need any of that, and this is what you get out of the box from Symbol. You can definitely calibrate based on use cases, and that's the customization layer that we offer at every single product. And the third one is pretty interesting, which is the domain intelligence product that we have, that enables you to look for the things that you want to find. So, all the intents, characteristics, themes that you want in the conversation, like agent empathy or politeness or negotiation or pricing, which would mean different things for your business because it's very specific to your domain. You can give a few examples to Symbol using trackers, and we will generalize those examples and match them in meaning to other instances and give you back. The problem that it solves is that you don't need to continue to build custom classifiers for huge amounts of data. And also, this intelligence is directly connected with everything else that you can generate with Symbol in the other product lines. And then we recently launched summarization, which seems to be one of the most popular new APIs that we released, that are being used by marketing teams for building SEO content, for customer contact center experiences, to automatically summarize the conversation, to even content, giving recommendations and recap of what is it in content. So these are some of the products that we have. But in addition to these, the technology itself and how it is available, we have a suite of APIs and SDKs which enables easy access to this technology for developers, so that your dependency on a data science team massively reduces in your organization, and developers become the new AI and machine learning engineers with the access. And there are also UI components and pre-built UI experiences that we enable, that basically helps them to go to market fast and test different experiences quicker.
Interesting. Democratizing essentially, in part, access to, pretty powerful machine learning models, basically.
Abs- Absolutely, that definitely has been the goal.
Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting. So I wonder if we can dive into some of these areas. So you've got the four kind of, or three core kind of areas: conversation processing, contextual insights, domain intelligence. What would be an example of like the kind of company? We'll get into those details in a minute if we can. What would be an example of the kind of companies that are utilizing this technology? Your background, you said, was in telco. Is it predominantly telco organizations that are utilizing it? Is it kind of varied across industries? Like where will we most likely see Symbl.ai in use today?
Yeah, no, it's funny because although I am an enterprise person from the background, we didn't actually start selling into the enterprise until our first 1 year at Symbol. We were really excited with other startups and mid-market companies that are really thinking about taking conversations to the next level by building those experiences. So our target became a lot of growth stage startup companies as well as mid markets that are trying to really build awesome use cases. We work with companies like, in the webinar space, we work with companies like Airme, Tubilo, Remo, Experience Welcome, all these that are trying to build a very awesome accessibility and inclusive experiences in their products, with live captioning, with taking advantage of that audio interaction itself and informing other workflows. We work with companies like Bandwidth specifically, which is where they're focused on the lead generation use case, answering machine detection, outbound call center. We work with companies in the collaboration space. Update.ai is a great customer where they're building a customer success product and using the calls to inform next steps and actions and topics, so as to fuel the customer success conversations to other areas in their business. Yeah, so we work with a bunch of high growth companies, I would say, and few enterprises.
Interesting. What would you say? How would you kind of summarize the market as it stands, as far as kind of like NLP solutions are concerned? Like, obviously, at the moment, you've got certain companies, like mostly large organizations that have, and teams, centers of excellence. You mentioned data scientists, machine learning engineers, and stuff. large companies that have the resources to do that, which are, I would say, if you look at companies like Walmart, a lot of the big banks in America have got a lot of this stuff, like Citibank and a bunch of others, JP Morgan, all running this kind of stuff, across various different channels and including things like biometrics and stuff. So there's a degree of sophistication, I would say, within some organizations. What's your, in that kind of mid-market and also the enterprise, and generally speaking, what's your kind of take on the market's maturity as far as understanding the kind of products that are available and how they can utilize them? So, for example, with Symbl.ai, there's a whole bunch of capabilities there, a whole bunch of value that can be captured, but a business somewhere needs to understand either that it's got a pain point or a need that it can solve. And so, what's your general understanding, or kind of like thoughts on the maturity of people's awareness around the capabilities that NLP solutions like this can provide?
Yeah, I think the last 2 years were very interesting because of the abundance of digital data, the advancements that we have seen in just an application of NLP and machine learning and communication workflows has awesomely increased. Overall, I would say I bisect the market into two phases. One is the builders market and one is the buyers market. And the builders market are the teams which are very excited to build solutions. They are, whether it's data scientists or developers, they and product managers, they have an approach to building custom solutions that best fit their ecosystem. And then the buyers market are the ones which are looking to just to deploy out of the box solutions like products that can directly integrate with some of the other workflows in their system and have and give them all this information out of the box so that they don't need to invest into building. And it depends upon the strategy of the business. Like, do you want full control, customization, cheaper scalability, and do you have resources to do that? Or do you want to get up to speed with analyzing some conversation data for your business first before actually building anything? So those are like the two core approaches. And a lot of solutions in the market are distributed across these two approaches based on the build and the buy. Within the build ecosystem, then we have technologies which are open source friendly and technologies which are out of the box cloud solutions, APIs. And I think the open source initiatives still have a lot of data dependency. Like we've heard from customers that it's very easy to get to a first outcome value, like deploy a model and get started in like probably less than half a day using the technologies that are available today. But getting that to production level, making sure that it actually works on the data that you need is still a big hassle. So but if it's the core strategy of your company and you want to build that particular IP within your business, then that's definitely the way to go to continue to use open source technologies, build a data science team and practice and really have that invested in. And then the other approach there is just the developers where they can access cloud APIs, which are available, use your existing, spend more time on figuring out user experiences and how user will see all of that, and invest the same dollars in solving that end user problems as opposed to solving the technology problems. So it again depends upon, I think, the overall whether this technology is mainstream for your business, how mainstream it is, do you want to own that IP? So answering all that questions defines one segment of the market. Within the builders market itself, I would say there are tools which are amazingly available for building virtual assistant, intelligent virtual assistants and chatbots. That's one segment. The other segment is everything around voice analytics, speech to text. I consider that as one bucket. And then the third bucket is really the conversational intelligence bucket, which talks about conversations at multiple modes and not just voice itself and leverages the text content. All of this is still conversations. There's a whole NLP market that you can use on document data, on text data, which is available. Those are different NLP building blocks. And I think the type of data really, really matters when you're thinking about what technology to use and how to actually apply it. So I don't know if that was helpful, but
Mm.
that's like an overview.
Yeah, no, it's a good breakdown that actually. Um, one of the use cases that I can see this working pretty well for, especially with like almost like a combination of the speaker diarization plus the conversational processing and even summarization would be, you know, in call centers, there's obviously a huge thing with compliance. Like certain industries are heavily regulated. You need to make sure that you say certain things to people. Like if you ever get, try and apply for a mortgage or speak to a mortgage broker, and you have to sit there for 5 minutes while they start kind of, reading you the T's and C's to make sure that we're not giving financial advice. There's a whole bunch of regulation that sits around it. So I can see there being a use case here around compliance. I want to get into some of the questions that we've got coming through. And by the way, if you're tuning in, please do stick the questions, any questions you have for Surbhi in the comments, and we'll do our best to get to them. This one was a while back from Rajiv Kumar. You know, not necessarily looking at compliance, but that's a use case that I can see being pretty prevalent. But his question is this solution available on premise for things like contact centers with the ability to run offline with no exposure to private clouds? Or I think you alluded to cloud based earlier on. Is it purely a cloud solution? And what's your
It
thoughts
is.
on prem
Yeah.
versus cloud?
So Symbl is a cloud-based solution, but I do think Rajiv popped the question when you were also talking about Deepgram, and Deepgram folks are also our friends. So Rajiv, you can definitely check out Deepgram. I think they do support on-prem solutions.
Cool. Apologies for the delay in that, Rajiv. We've got another question from Richard Wozeka. Within the domains offering you mentioned, the domain intelligence, have you have any experience with utilizing this technology for retailers? Any retailers using it? And if so, what kind of specific challenges or advice would you give for retailers wanting to utilize a solution like this?
Yeah, I think there is the combination of building hybrid experiences for your own business, where analyzing the free conversations which are happening on calls and identifying intents and converting it into your chatbot experiences. That's usually a big dependency on subject matter experts today. So we have seen retailers capitalizing on the other voice conversations data which are happening in the business and extracting intents and questions from there to build workflows within their chatbots. That has been a big use case. That really massively reduces your time to building a workflow for your virtual assistant experience, and also helps you reduce dependency on subject matter experts for building that conversation design. So I hope that's helpful.
Interesting. I wonder if we can give some other examples of some use cases, because the one you alluded to is a really good one. The outbound dialer detecting voicemails and all that kind of stuff. I'm wondering if you can walk us through
Yeah.
how that looks and how it works.
Yeah, so traditionally answering machine detection, human detection, fax detection have usually been based on beeps and tones and voices, and it's definitely been a stretch to go beyond a certain accuracy. What Symbl does is brings the in addition to those aspects of voice and tones, we bring the content and the context itself to the answering machine detection or the human detection within that initial 1 second, 2 seconds of the call period, so that a decision can be made with the outbound call center whether this call needs to be sent to an agent for a call because actually someone picked up the call and is answering, or it needs to go into a voicemail and a voicemail needs to be sent, or the call needs to be disconnected. So making that decision massively reduces the amount of dollars that you will invest into calls which are actually not landing at the right moments usually, and leaving voicemails with before the tone actually occurred, and sometimes you only see like goodbye, thank you in your voicemails, and you have no idea like why was it what was the intent of this. So anyway, so that's our the outbound call center use case. I think it is pretty interesting because it saves a lot of dollars in terms of not leaving messages at incorrect instances, not actually connecting the call when it's not the right time, and then three, being able to provide the right message and leave it as a voicemail when people actually pick up or when you have to actually leave the voicemail. The interesting piece is that we've been working with some customers on intelligent voicemails, which is really highlighting and identifying the entities within that, transcribing that, which is now comes default with a few phones. But that's the area for outbound call center.
It's interesting that, because it's a really good example of, there's a lot to be said for the typical question that I think a lot of people that are not involved in this industry or technology have when they hear about AI and they hear about this kind of technology, is this whole kind of like humans replacing jobs situation, which I'm sure you've gone over numerous times in numerous conversations with numerous people in the past. but it's kind of like, if you look at the challenges that many businesses are facing, most businesses could do with all the help they can get, because people don't scale half as well as this technology can. I think that use case is a very good example of how AI technologies can be used to empower businesses so that they can then spend their resources in the right kind of areas, as opposed to having people dial numbers to figure out if there's an answer phone, and then
Yeah.
all that messing around. It's just a really great example of how AI can support businesses and help them do things better.
Absolutely. The other one I think that is very interesting is real-time agent coaching or call coaching aspect, where identifying the parameters of the quality of interactions that have happened before by myself or by people in my own team who are excelling at it, and recommending me those quality parameters during the call itself, and assisting agents, but not just with knowledge base articles, with more than that, with my own voice and tone and the topics that I'm covering, depending upon the intent of the call. How much time am I spending in pricing versus listening versus talking, and things like that. So, real time agent coaching actually really impacts overall, one, the onboarding time of new people in the organization, given that we are in now these remote weird times. Everything is remote, and I think onboarding has become a big challenge, not just in businesses to onboard their own employees, but agents and sales teams and call center teams and trainers who are taking lessons and coaching other students. So that area has been, I think, really amazing to see how some of our customers are building the real time coaching experiences in their own domains, again using our domain intelligence capabilities.
Interesting. Is that the level of granularity that we're talking here? Is that an
Yes.
agent can basically say how much time did I spend talking about payments and pricing versus other areas of the conversation?
Yes, absolutely. And
Wow.
that's the technology that we've built. So in Symbl, we took from a technology standpoint, a little different approach, because we have spent a lot of time in the industry working on deep learning alone in the beginning. So when we started Symbl, we knew that deep learning alone is not sufficient to solve a problem like this. So we focused ourselves on building a hybrid architecture using both unsupervised and supervised machine learning. And that enables us to continue to monitor context of our conversations and augment ourselves with a framework that helps us remove the biases of just deep learning alone, and also helps us to expand the scope of where you can apply Symbl at across multiple conversations and not just one type of conversation data. And that's why we can enable identifying a structure of the conversation out of the box, where you can segment the conversation into pieces and say this time was spent on X topic versus this time spent on Y topic. And so yeah, that's about it.
And that doesn't require any training data whatsoever on behalf of the company.
Yes, so we don't need training data from our customers when they start using the platform. They can use our APIs out of the box. We do require sometimes, if you want to fine tune the results to your specific use case and you're not satisfied with the out of the box because it's either a new use case or you need more specificity within the application itself, you can use our customization and calibration capabilities, which your developers can do yourself. Like, you don't need to build huge data volumes. You can give a few hints and examples, and then the system basically calibrates itself to develop that thin layer of customization on top of what you're already using. So it really speeds up the process to go to market.
Interesting. So how do you we've got some questions coming through which I will get to, and thanks for your patience, everyone who's putting some stuff down there. But I'm interested in this whole kind of like training side of things. So how are you able to have a solution like this that is able to be deployed across lots of different industries, domains, use cases that doesn't require much training data? Like I could imagine, is it because you just recognize and the models behind the scenes are trained on like the typical format of a conversation? Like most organizations are likely going to be talking about, customer onboarding, sales, complaints, retention, exit in kind of like, is that what it is? Are you kind of like Yeah, how did you get to the point where you don't require training data? I suppose is the question.
Yeah. So I think there are three parts of, depending upon what product and what application are you using. So for conversation processing products, speech recognition in itself is obviously primarily deep learning based, and we do have some augmentation from an unsupervised standpoint. We do support multiple languages there, but on our next phase, which is identifying out of the box insights, which are the topics and hierarchies and insights, it's very hard to build a system which can generally be applicable across multiple conversations with training data. So this is where we took our technology is patented now. So we just got our patents approved a couple of months back, which is awesome. But that piece really helps identify the structure and various dimensions of the conversation itself using unsupervised machine learning. So think of it as literally your brain mapping the various dimensions of how the conversation is progressing while the conversation is progressing, and helping index and create like an internal graph map of the various themes and the various instances and the topics that was discussed and how relevant were those topics. So we built all that brain for every single conversation in itself, and expose that in form of topics and hierarchies and sentiments. There are some patterns that we recognize, like action items, follow-ups, and questions, which are not really specific to a type of domain, and they really depend upon language modality. So if you think about action item, the modality of that action item sentence would be the same in a sales call versus a customer support call versus a meeting. It's
Mm,
very futuristic. There are certain traits of the language itself from a linguistic standpoint that is very similar, and that's how that particular arm is collated. Some those insights require some pattern recognition, so we use obviously deep learning there. And then our third, the domain intelligence piece, is really our zero shot learning. If anyone is familiar with that, it's the ability to be able to reduce the time from when you give instances and examples of what you want to find to when a model is built and actually applicable. So they are like zero shot learning. Think of them as like mini classifiers that get built within like a second or 2 seconds, which help you identify over our very big in-house conversation model that we built. So those are like the different layers, and they all connect with each other on the same base context understanding piece. And that's how all this information that we generate is fully contextually connected.
interesting. I think there'll be some people listening. If you have been listening to the podcast for a while, there'll be some people tuning in who will be familiar with zero shot training and few shot training. We spent the back end of last year trying to explore a whole bunch of different emerging NLU solutions, and so I think hopefully people will have a degree of familiarity to that. So would it be fair to say then that as you're processing audible data, the have I understood it right in that all of this context and all of this kind of like understanding is basically created almost in real time as the call is progressing? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, interesting. That's wicked. I want to
Yeah.
jump into a question from Rainer Bruns. Shout out to Rainer. He's a CTO at Scotty Technologies and was on the podcast last week. So if you haven't saw that podcast yet, go and check it out. It was incredibly insightful. So Rainer's question is: sorry, I might have missed this. What languages do you support? So is there, obviously I'm assuming English? Is there any other language support outside of English?
Yeah, we for transcription we support multiple languages, but we recently actually announced trackers in Spanish as our second language. So the domain intelligence piece that I was talking about is will be launched in Spanish in beta, I think, over the next few months, which we are really excited about. It's our first language of intelligence, and more to come. But we support multiple languages for transcription.
Interesting. What has been the challenges, I suppose, or the learnings that you've got from taking something that is a unique, patented technology? It's unique as far as what it does from hearing the use cases and what it enables businesses to do and stuff like that. The control that it gives you, the insights it gives you. It's not I wouldn't have said it doesn't sound like it's similar to a typical NLU system, for example. So what have been the unique challenges or learnings that you've got from taking this patented technology and trying to kind of like make it applicable for Spanish? What have you learned from that that's going to give you uh, make the next language easier, should we say?
Yeah, I think the way that we architected our first language itself was built in a way that it's very scalable to multiple languages, and that was the objective. I think having a dependency on data to an extent always helps, but not fully. Basically, removes the core foundation of a huge dependency on data for moving to different languages. And that was the foundation of the system, like making sure we build a hybrid architecture and not a deep learning focused alone architecture helped us at first to identify kind of like the framework that will help us scale faster. And that's what we did.
Hmm, interesting. Question from Michael Nelson. Shout out to Mike. I don't know why it's looking all strange and funny on the screen there. How would your platform integrate with a legacy contact center or call recording platform? I suppose it's a bit similar to the question from Richard, was it, or Rajiv earlier on. So obviously, a lot of call centers and a lot of conversations that happen within businesses. There are kind of like legacy call recording systems that kind of record those calls, and often actually I think they just record the audio and store audio files, which makes things even worse. You've just got buckets and buckets of audio files kicking around everywhere. I don't know whether you've done this yet or before, but what would your kind of thoughts be on how to, turn what is a legacy call recording system and turn that into essentially a bucket of insight for the business?
Yeah, we still work with cloud based recordings at this point of time. So like if you have all the call recordings within your contact center and you're putting them on AWS S3 bucket or data stores like that, Symbl can directly connect and convert those recordings into insights, actions, transcription, all of that. And that will also help you get rid of those recordings if at all. Save some space, save the capacity, and invest that storage dollars into something else. But yeah, we don't have an on-prem solution today. So if you have recordings on the premise, then we might not be the best fit for it.
What would your kind of advice be to a company who, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but I know that it's something like, I think when we had Avaya on the podcast, obviously a large contact center provider, they were saying that it's somewhere in the region of 90% of their customers have on-prem solutions. Genesis have got, I think it's something in the region of 50 to 60% still on-prem. And so there's a big legacy kind of infrastructure there. Now, there's lots of conversations that happen within businesses that are not in the contact center. Lots of conversations happen in a whole bunch of different environments using a whole bunch of different phone systems and stuff.
Yeah.
But let's say that there's an opportunity, a team of developers or a potential client has the need to utilize this technology, and they've got a choice basically. Do we spend time taking all of our archived stuff and trying to see what insights we can glean from our historic data, or we can begin from now, which may be a cloud migration, or starting to record calls into a different environment so that they can utilize this technology? Would your advice be to spend time trying to analyze all of the stuff that you already have, or to essentially begin from today and begin using the technology to extract insights and analysis from here on out?
Yeah, I always think of the effort versus impact kind of framework in my mind. Is like, look at the effort that wouldn't take you to migrate those recordings into cloud versus the effort that would take you to just plug in new recordings and see the impact. And what's the end use case? Is the use case just to audit calls and audit historic calls? Is the use case to save data space? Is the use case to learn from conversations actively and help with coaching? So I think those are the two factors: the effort versus impact, and the use case that you're providing and what data maps towards. So I don't think that there is one right answer to it,
Hmm.
and it really depends upon the problem that someone is trying to solve.
Interesting. Another question from Richard Warzecker. And I think maybe as we touched on this when we were talking about that whole um, answer phone detection and handover and stuff like that. But is that an example of, or is there any other examples of using a solution where a call center agent smoothly hands off a conversation to your AI, or vice versa? Like a core bot scenario. I know that Symbl.ai isn't a bot as such, but any other examples, or any examples of where the the Symbl.ai technology is handing off to an agent or vice versa, or is it that the technology is running at the same time while people are talking, it's doing his work behind the scenes. Like, what's your thoughts on
Yeah,
with
so you
questions
can,
there?
hey Richard, so you can use the conversation analysis and build the experience in your best way. Like I said, we are a builders platform, so we don't build the pieces to for the end-to-end solution. So if you already have like a voice bot running in the system and you want to build the handoff from calls and summarize the entire call conversation and send that from an API call to the voice bot as a summary before the voice bot interaction starts, totally doable. The other part doable is that always have an agent on the call during the voice bot, and your cobot scenario can also be done by stitching two conversations together. So it's really the experience that you want to build, but you will have APIs to integrate very easily into both those scenarios.
Mm. We've got a good question from Tyler Bryden. I'm assuming that, yeah, I didn't think I'll be able to read it. I'll try and what I'll do is I'll turn it off, I'll read it, and I'll put it back on again. So Tyler says, I'd love to hear the differences, opportunities, and challenges between speech data and text data. Uh, I love speech recognition, but there's obviously challenges with accuracy, whereas text is generally more accurate and well structured. Are you finding differences in the value of insights that come out of different mediums? So you mentioned there's a speech to text solution, but I think that a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about, I'll be surprised if it is purely based on text. I'm wondering whether you can walk us through a little bit of your opportunities, challenges when working with audio versus speech to text.
Yeah, hey Tyler. So the big part of Symbol as a platform that at least we have found challenges is how to normalize the speech to text data and make it available in a form that can be used for inferencing all the insights and understanding and analyzing that data. And you are right that text data on other mediums like chat and email and SMS. I wouldn't say SMS anymore, but email data or chat data is a little more structured as compared to voice data. Also, it depends upon which domain the voice data exists. So, in our experience, like contact center or sales agents or SDRs making phone calls, the voice data is very structured because they follow a script and they have to stick to those guidelines. There are predictable patterns. However, in more brainstorming sessions, in meetings, or in chaotic kind of like conversations which are not really following a script, it is more unstructured data. So a big part of work that we've done as Symbol is to find out ways in which we can normalize that speech recognition and bring it to a level of acceptance that then makes it applicable to be analyzed, because it's otherwise it's like garbage in garbage out and it doesn't make any sense. So that's where we do a lot of work in kind of correcting, comprehending the mistakes, correcting some obvious issues. So if you talk about lettuce in the beginning, which is LUT space US, and you talk about lettuce in the end and it's interpreted as a vegetable, then you can actually go and correct it because you have context of the entire conversation. So that's a lot of that contextual understanding applied on speech recognition one helps us normalize that data, and then the rest of the stuff is applied on top of it, which has to make sure that context is taken into consideration. Otherwise, in speech data, people don't usually, people write in a very totally different way as opposed to what they speak in. Like when you write, you would refer the same entity again when you start the next sentence. But when you talk, you would not. You would just co reference it in multiple ways. And so it's very important to have context in consideration while actually analyzing that normalized speech recognition data. This is one of the reasons why we built a platform and didn't use any out of the box NLP APIs. But yeah, I mean, I can talk all day long about that and have offline.
Interesting. So how much of what you do then relies on like text data versus audio processing? So it's obviously things like speaker diarization. The end result of that is presumably it's a text file that has, speakers identified. Like if anyone's used Otter or something similar, Descript or something, you might be familiar with that kind of layout. But then you've got scenarios where you're identifying the sound of an answer phone beep to then be able to leave the answer phone message or detecting an answer phone in the first place. So that doesn't seem to me as though it's a speech recognition thing. I'm wondering whether you can, maybe give some examples of where audio itself is preferred versus where text in the end result is preferred.
Yeah, I think true contextual understanding comes by taking into consideration both mediums, both text and audio. And just as any other startup, like, you always have your own limitations of investing resources. And while understanding audio signals is a more solved problem, understanding the text signals and contextually interpreting it was a more unsolved problem. So as a company, we started on that aspect first and then slowly added other layers of audio in itself, which are more predictable in nature. So today we do, I would say, 70% of our decision making is still on text, and 30% we do consider audio signals in different ways and forms. And the goal is to be able to truly 100% capitalize both mediums, because you could, talk in a very you could talk in a nice way, but actually mean something very different from how you speak about it. So those signals sometimes you miss, and then it appears as false positives. And I think combining both those channels would actually result in making the outcomes more relevant and accurate.
Hmm. Cool. Well, one more question, which we'll get through from Abhinav, and then I'd love to get into your thoughts on where things are heading, because this space seems to be just completely exploding. So
Yeah.
we've got one question from Abhinav Singh, which is, do you have plans to capitalize on metadata present in other data sources like CRM? So you're talking about contextual data. CRM systems and others can provide some of that contextual data. Any kind of examples of, maybe it's even not with CRM specifically, but any examples of how you might be using data from elsewhere to help either improve the insights or to generate new use cases?
Yeah. Hey, Abhinav. So today, the goal of Symbol is to really provide product builders all the analysis from conversations and give you the power and empower, product builders to use that in conjunction with the metadata in CRM. So if you are building a CRM product and you have insights from CRM metadata, our goal is to enable you with conversation intelligence and insights that you will combine together and create the business logic that makes your product differentiated. And that's, I mean, because we are a horizontal platform, we work with CRM platforms building, the revenue intelligence experience in their products. We work with edtech platforms building a great content dictionary, post content. And so if for from us, from our standpoint, we don't want to own the metadata of any product. We want to give more metadata, which basically creates a more compelling experience for your own product. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. Essentially, it's you're providing the capabilities and a level of control for engineering teams to be able to essentially piece together whatever it is they need to piece together to get them to where they need to be.
And I think no one knows customers, your customers, like you do when you're building a
Mm,
product. And even if CRM is, let's say, CRM is such a big market. I mean, there are a huge number of products out there, but the segment and the USP that you have for the specific market segment that you are targeting is unique in itself. So if we try to analyze the metadata from CRM, it might not work as horizontally as we want it to be, because we are not selling an end product. We are still selling a builder's platform with APIs that enables builders to go and create those compelling experiences, which is why our focus is always to make sure that we provide you case studies and recommendations on how other customers are solving this problem, but we still enable you to own that piece.
mm, wicked. What are some of the most exciting case studies that you've seen? You mentioned providing care. What are the ones that got you really excited when you've seen your product used in this kind of way?
Yeah, I am always amazed by how startups solve these problems at a pace that no one else can imagine. We have a few case studies in as a startup, which I must mention, Vocalize. They are based in South Africa, and they are building a contact center experience, a contact center intelligence for customers within that region itself. And they were able to spin up the entire experience on top of Symbol, I think, with a single developer in 2 to 3 months time frame. Which is phenomenal, with bootstrapping the business and getting multiple clients on that product. It absolutely amazed me by looking at the time and effort they spent on figuring out the user experience piece and not actually building the machine learning infrastructure. And it is by far one of the most beautiful experiences that I have witnessed across many products that I've worked with. So really kudos to their team, and like 3 people team, but have built a compelling. So they massively reduce the time taken for market, the dollars invested, the go to market speed, and the first iteration of experience that they built. That was awesome, and that's in the contact center space, so it's very relevant to what we're talking about. And it's all about scoring calls in a recorded fashion. So you upload your calls to that product, and then you can and connect it directly to where your call recordings are being stored, and they automatically create a call scoring algorithm for it. So that's a big
Oh,
one. And then the other one is in the emotional intelligence space with Evermore, which also is a company that I'm really excited about. They are solving a problem around Gen Z and giving them a friendly, trusted experience where they can extract emotional intelligence from those conversations and recommend content and community to those Gen Z population. And they're also using Symbol within their own ecosystem in order to really provide value and understand what people are talking. So totally different use cases on other ends of the world, but both our case studies are around the speed and the time that it took them from thinking to building that experience to actually making it live, and the amount of capital that they invested in getting that live within that short period of time.
interesting. Evermore was that? Did you say?
Yeah, that's right.
Evermore, interesting. I have to check that out. It sounds. I mean, there's lots of different places. I know that like social audio at the beginning of 2021 went through like a massive boom, and I think Twitter Spaces seems to be doing all right. I think Clubhouse might have died out, but I do think that maybe it's that particular thing went through that kind of what is it, the peak of inflated expectations on that hype cycle. I think that probably got through that period a lot faster than most other technologies did, simply because of the situation that everyone was in, which was everyone's locked down, then lockdown releases, and the hype dies down a bit. But I do think there's definitely a place for that social audio space and like Twitter spaces and things like that. Like I can imagine a place where, and maybe this is you maybe shine some light on how this might work, but part of the challenge that kind of social media companies or anyone that wants to provide any degree of social audio, or you can think of Anchor and others as well that have a similar kind of philosophy. Part of it is, how do you moderate something that you can't see? How do you know whether someone's abusing somebody? How do you know whether it's like violence kicking off? How do you know whether somebody's inciting like riots at the Capitol or whatever it might be? So, and then also, how do you kind of like judge how engaging a room is to then be able to feed that higher up in the algorithm and all this kind of stuff? Seems to me as though this could be a potential perfect fit for this kind of technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a key use case in recommending or just exposing the content of the conversation within a room to the people outside the room, so that one, you can attract more people to come within the room. Because I know, if even if the room title is founders raising money, and if someone is talking about experiences in Series A, I'm very interested now to go and actually engage and participate and share my experiences. But founders raising money is too generic for me to be able to really understand whether should I be participating in that or not.
Mm,
So recommending the actual live topic of discussion and making it available in like room details, like you click on it and you can see a quick recap of what has been talked about so far, and this is the live topic going on, will really enable more engagement. And then obviously eventually understanding what kind of people participated, joined, and actually interacted at what point of time in the conversation, and making sure that new rooms and content is recommended based on their engagement patterns in the previous ones during the conversation, not just selecting which ones do I need to actually view. I think those two are really compelling. Like you said, we have a customer called Racket, such an amazing company, and they're building a great experience for enabling people to communicate within, I think, less than a minute. That's or 90
wow.
seconds. I think that's basically their period. And it has been amazing to see how they think about audio exchanges within the ecosystem. So yeah, good company to check out.
Racket. Got some homework to do after this.
Yeah, I mean, I can probably name all the 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 cool, awesome companies which are getting built right now in different spaces as we are interacting with.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you should start your own podcast and just have all of those companies on the Founders Podcast. Um, I'm interested though because I can see another use case, which would be it made me think a little bit of this podcast right now. You know, the topic was called exploring AI-based conversational intelligence, purposefully because we have explored lots of different avenues, and within that umbrella, there's lots of different subtopics that we've got into. But it reminds me a little bit of how, like, when you watch, like, I don't know, the news on a morning, and whatever the headlines being discussed will just be floating across the bottom.
Yeah,
What's missing for things like this, like platforms like Restream that I use, huge broadcasting, Twitch, which is owned by Amazon, a bunch
yeah,
of like either startups or large companies that are providing these environments for creators to create content, but they don't necessarily have either the team size or the bandwidth or the concentration to be able to create things like what's being discussed right now, communicate that to the people tuning in. So there's a whole bunch of use cases I can see around this that
yeah.
apply all over the place.
Content distribution is a very, very big area of focus from a lot of customers that we work with. And a big part of that is just searching and indexing content. There is so much of content getting available at this point of time, and not everything will be on video or audio or on text. It's going to be a mix of all. So, building those experiences for search index of content, moderating that content, distributing that content, and giving the right recommendations. Like, yeah, really big on, I think, because of COVID, we are seeing like massive amounts of digital content getting created.
Yeah.
Just everyone's online, but there are very few experiences that really maximizes the potential within those content. So yeah, I'm really excited about what's to be built in 2022 about it.
Interesting. Is that one of the themes? What are some of the other themes that you're noticing? Some of the other trends that you're observing happening where Symbl.ai is either playing right now or has the potential to in future? What are your kind of like 2022 trends?
Yeah, I think the big one is going beyond speech recognition. That's a big theme that we are looking at this point of time. Last 2 years, a lot of people implemented speech recognition as their step one, and now when we talk to companies, they are more matured in their thinking. Is like, I don't want to just implement speech recognition and get a bunch of text data. What I really want to do is use it in order to inform my managers, or my onboarding time, or improve my average call handling time, or increase the number of sales calls that we are able to take, or just create a more indexed knowledge base for my business. So, like, these use cases are becoming more matured, and we are seeing a lot of customers that already have transcription coming to us and putting we, by the way, also have a text API that enables you to ingest transcription data. So if any of the companies already have integrated with the speech recognition solution, we can actually take the text generated in form of transcript and create all those insights, actions, and knowledge on that transcript data as well. So we're seeing a lot of those folks coming in at this point of time, which shows the maturity of the market towards thinking about use cases from audio and video and not just text,
Mm.
for which I'm really excited about.
Nice, wicked. Well, this has been absolutely unbelievable. It's been fantastic. I really appreciate you spending some time. I mean, at the back end of last year, what was really interesting for me, speaking to a lot of different kind of like startups and stuff like that, was finding the companies that are not pushing the status quo, but companies that are trying to enable something new and innovative and different. And I think that my kind of summary at the back end of last year is that there's a lot of saturation and noise in the whole kind of NLP space in general, especially in the conversational AI space. And for either like users, developers, designers, strategists who need to use the technology, or for businesses who are planning on how to utilize it effectively, it can be quite difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff and figure out who is actually, who's decent, who's not, and who's reliable, all kind of stuff. And I think that what is interesting me is finding those companies that are pushing the boundaries, enabling use cases that people might not have even thought about. I mean, the video I made yesterday on the promo for this was talking about how you can extract data from conversations that you didn't even know existed, which I think is a lot of what we're kind of getting into. And so the world is your oyster kind of thing. So I'm a huge fan of the technology and some of the stuff that's been materialized with it. So I appreciate you spending some time with us, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Kane. Yeah, we're super pumped on what more use cases will be uncovered by conversation data. It's such an underutilized source today, and it stops after speech recognition. So, pushing that boundary is one of the core important themes in the business. So, yeah, I'm really excited to share some of that today in the
Nice
podcast.
one. Nice one. Well, if you are interested in taking a closer look, you can go to Symbl.ai. For those on the podcast that can't see the URL, it's symbl.ai. And Surbhi, any other resources or things like that that you would point people to? Anything else that people can go and check out or reach out, anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to geek out on building some experiences, we launched a forever free plan that enables you to try building with Symbol on a monthly basis without actually paying anything, which is really awesome. We provide 1,000 minutes and 10,000 words of free processing. So if you want to geek out on building a cool experience, check out our GitHub repos. There are a bunch of those open source applications that already exist, and you can try your hands on. We have a Slack support channel where you can drop in all the queries, which is open, and we have tons of engineers working and building awesome use cases for all product managers and technical stakeholders and decision makers. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to spend some time brainstorming use cases and identifying what's next in your business. So really excited about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. I will put all of those links in the show notes. A bit distracted because I'm finding the link for tomorrow's broadcast, which I'm going to put in the chat in a minute ago. I will definitely put all of those links in the show notes on YouTube, on the podcast, on the website, and please do check it out. And thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been a pretty active broadcast. We've had a lot of questions, a lot of comments. So thank you all for tuning in. It's massively appreciated. We're back again tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. We're talking to Benoit Alvarez of Qbox. And if you are interested in that, you can subscribe there. If you're tuning in on the podcast and you want to know when these broadcasts are happening and the upcoming guests, then please do go to vux.world/subscribed. And if you are not subscribed already, where have you been all my life? You can also subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter, which is going really well. It's over 3,000 subscribers now, and every single week, every Tuesday, I publish what's been going on in the world of conversational AI and natural language processing. There's funding announcements, there's partnership announcements, there's deals announcements, there's news, new product releases, general analysis and commentary on what's going on in this space. So you'll have to go to my LinkedIn profile and find it because LinkedIn doesn't make the URLs that approachable. But anyway, thank you for tuning in. And Surbhi, thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure to have you along. And we will see you, those that join us, tomorrow.